That evidence bag does not prove I am guilty, Maya Carter said quietly. It proves someone in this building has already made a fatal mistake. The courtroom in Briarwood, Virginia, fell silent for less than a second before Sergeant Grant Holloway smiled, as if her words amused him. Maya stood beside the defense table with her wrists secured in front of her, wearing a plain navy coat over a cream blouse and dark slacks. The cold fluorescent lights flattened every face in the room, but they could not hide the confidence in Holloway's expression. He placed a clear evidence bag on the prosecution table and turned it so the judge, the reporters, and the people seated behind him could see the white powder sealed inside. This was recovered from her right coat pocket, he announced. She was given every opportunity to cooperate. Maya did not look at him. She looked at the label. A 6-digit evidence number had been printed beneath a red federal seal. To everyone else, it was an ordinary inventory code. To Maya, it was a warning. The first 3 digits identified a restricted federal evidence series connected to Operation Glass Harbor, the investigation she had spent 6 months building under another name. That bag had never been released to local police. It had never appeared in a public filing. It was supposed to be locked inside a monitored federal storage facility 40 miles away. Yet now it sat beneath courtroom lights as the centerpiece of a case against her. Judge Rebecca Sloan adjusted her glasses and reviewed the arrest report. Pages turned. A clock ticked above the American flag. Somewhere near the back row, a reporter whispered that the police had caught another distributor before she could leave town. Maya heard every word. She also saw Officer Travis Reed seated behind Holloway, his shoulders rigid, his eyes fixed on the floor. He had signed the evidence receipt. His name appeared beneath Holloway's on the report. But when Maya studied him, she did not see confidence. She saw fear. Ms. Carter, Judge Sloan said, your attorney advises the court that you are declining to discuss your reason for being at the convenience store last night. Is that correct? Lena Foster, the court-appointed defense attorney beside Maya, leaned closer. You need to give me something, she whispered. The judge is considering detention. Maya kept her gaze on the evidence bag. I cannot explain it yet. Lena frowned. Cannot, or will not. Both. Across the aisle, Holloway folded his arms. He believed her silence meant defeat. He believed the uniform, the report, and the sealed bag had already decided which voice the court would trust. Imagine standing in a courtroom while the people who framed you describe your guilt as fact. Imagine recognizing the evidence against you as property stolen from the investigation you created. Maya felt the weight of the moment, but she did not let it reach her face. If she revealed her identity too soon, Holloway would warn everyone connected to him. Files would disappear. Phones would be replaced. Witnesses would suddenly forget what they had seen. She needed him to keep talking. She needed every lie entered into the official record. Judge Sloan looked toward the prosecution. Sergeant Holloway, proceed with your statement. Holloway stepped forward and began describing Maya as nervous, evasive, and dangerous. None of it was true. She had not raised her voice. She had not resisted. She had simply watched as he searched her coat and produced the bag he had placed there moments earlier. Maya glanced at the courtroom clock. 10:17 in the morning. According to the signal protocol established with her federal team, she had 43 minutes before they assumed her cover had been compromised. 43 minutes before Operation Glass Harbor changed forever. Holloway lifted the evidence bag again, unaware that its tracking seal had been designed to identify the person who removed it from federal custody. He thought he had carried proof of Maya's guilt into court. In reality, he had carried the first piece of evidence in the case against himself. 6 months earlier, Maya Carter arrived in Briarwood under the name Claire Bennett with 2 suitcases, a rented silver sedan, and a cover story detailed enough to survive casual questions. According to her employment records, she was a regional compliance specialist for a pharmaceutical distribution company. She leased a modest apartment above a bakery on Jefferson Street, registered for utilities, joined a neighborhood fitness center, and began drinking coffee every morning at the same corner cafe. To the people around her, Claire was quiet, professional, and predictable. To the Drug Enforcement Administration, Maya was the lead undercover agent assigned to Operation Glass Harbor, a confidential investigation into missing narcotics, altered evidence records, and suspicious arrests connected to the Briarwood Police Department. The pattern had first appeared in routine audits. Sealed evidence entered police storage, but smaller quantities reached the courthouse. Cash listed on arrest reports disappeared before trial. Body cameras failed at convenient moments. Complaints from defendants were dismissed because the officers involved had strong records and confident testimony. Most of those defendants came from black neighborhoods where families lacked money for private attorneys or independent investigators. Maya began by studying paperwork. She compared arrest times, evidence weights, officer assignments, and security logs. One name appeared again and again. Sergeant Grant Holloway supervised the local narcotics unit, approved the disputed reports, and personally delivered evidence in several cases where property later vanished. His public reputation was nearly flawless. He spoke at schools, appeared beside city leaders, and gave interviews about protecting vulnerable communities. Behind the praise, however, the numbers refused to agree with his story. Maya spent weeks building a life close enough to observe him without attracting attention. Each morning, she sat near the cafe window and watched patrol vehicles move toward the station. Each afternoon, she worked from a rented office while encrypted files traveled to her federal team. At night, she met carefully selected sources in grocery store parking lots, church basements, and quiet public libraries. They told similar stories. Officers had searched cars without clear explanations. Evidence appeared where none had existed. People were pressured to accept plea agreements before anyone reviewed the camera footage. Maya never promised quick justice. She promised only that every detail would be recorded. Her most important source was a former evidence clerk named Samuel Pierce, who had noticed that Holloway sometimes entered the storage facility after midnight without appearing on the official schedule. Samuel was frightened, but he had saved copies of access logs and one blurred security image showing Holloway leaving through a rear door with a black equipment case. The date on that image matched the disappearance of a restricted federal evidence package. Maya enlarged the photograph until the pixels broke apart, but the outline of Holloway's face remained clear. Operation Glass Harbor now had direction, but not enough proof for arrests. The investigators needed to know where the stolen evidence went, who helped move it, and how many cases had been built around it. Maya continued living as Claire Bennett, smiling at neighbors, answering work emails, and pretending not to notice when the same unmarked police car appeared near her apartment twice in 1 week. Then, 4 days before the courtroom hearing, Samuel called from a public telephone and asked to meet at a convenience store on Route 7. His voice trembled as he said he had found the missing storage records. Maya agreed to meet him at 9 o'clock. She arrived early, parked beneath a bright security camera, and entered through the east door. Samuel never came. At 9:12, Holloway walked inside with Officer Travis Reed behind him. Maya saw their reflections in the glass refrigerator doors before either man spoke. Holloway was not there by accident. Someone had discovered that Claire Bennett was asking the right questions. They simply had not yet discovered who she really was. Holloway stopped near the front counter and let his gaze travel slowly across the store before settling on Maya. Officer Travis Reed remained several steps behind him, one hand resting near his radio, his expression tense rather than confident. The cashier looked up from a magazine, sensed the change in the air, and quietly moved closer to the register. Maya closed the refrigerator door and turned to face them. "Is there a problem, Sergeant?" she asked. Holloway smiled without warmth. "That depends on why you are here. I am buying coffee. At 9:12 at night, the store is open." His eyes narrowed. He had expected nervousness, perhaps an apology, perhaps the quick obedience he was accustomed to receiving from people who feared the uniform more than they trusted their own rights. Maya gave him none of those things. She remained still, her hands visible, her voice even. "Identification," Holloway said. Maya removed the wallet connected to her cover identity and handed him the license for Claire Bennett. He studied it longer than necessary. "You live on Jefferson Street. That is what the license says." Reed glanced toward the ceiling camera above the east entrance. Maya noticed. Holloway noticed her noticing. "We received a report about suspicious activity," he said. "What activity? You ask a lot of questions. You have not answered one." The cashier lowered his eyes. Outside, headlights moved across the windows as cars passed along Route 7. Samuel Pierce was nowhere in sight. Maya understood then that the meeting had been compromised before she arrived. Whether Samuel had been frightened away, detained, or forced into silence remained unknown. Holloway stepped closer and asked Maya to place her purse on the counter. She could have refused. She could have ended the encounter with one sentence and a federal credential. Instead, she considered the evidence they still needed. Holloway knew Claire Bennett was investigating him, but he did not know why. That ignorance was the only protection Operation Glass Harbor still possessed. Maya placed the purse down. "Am I free to leave?" she asked. "Not yet." Reed moved toward her right side while Holloway opened the purse and searched through ordinary items chosen to support her cover. Receipts, keys, hand lotion, a company identification card, and a notebook filled with harmless shipping figures. Finding nothing, Holloway looked toward Reed. Something silent passed between them. Reed asked Maya to step near the beverage cooler while he checked the side aisle. Maya obeyed, watching both men in the dark reflection of the glass doors. Holloway reached beneath his coat. His left hand moved toward the open pocket of Maya's navy coat, quick and practiced. A small clear bag disappeared inside. Maya saw everything in reflection. The angle of his wrist. The red seal. Reed turning his head away at the exact moment he should have been watching. Her pulse accelerated, but her expression did not change. Holloway stepped back and announced that he had reasonable cause to conduct a search. Seconds later, he reached into the same pocket and removed the bag with a performance of surprise designed for the camera. "Well," he said, holding it beneath the fluorescent light, "look what we found." Reed stared at the floor. The cashier whispered that Maya had arrived alone and had touched nothing except the refrigerator door, but Holloway warned him not to interfere with police business. Maya looked directly at Reed. He could not meet her eyes. "You know that was not mine," she said. Holloway answered for him. "What he knows will be written in the report." Maya understood the choice before her. Reveal herself, save her freedom, and lose the network before sunrise, or remain silent and let Holloway carry his lie into an official courtroom record. She chose the courtroom. As Reed read her rights in an unsteady voice, Maya looked once more at the camera above the east door. Its small green light was still glowing. Holloway believed he had created evidence. He had actually created a witness. The holding room at the Briarwood Police Department had no windows, only a steel table, 2 plastic chairs, and a ceiling light that hummed with the patience of something designed to make time feel heavier. Maya sat with her hands folded in front of her while Sergeant Grant Holloway reviewed the arrest report across from her. The document identified her as Claire Bennett, the name printed on the license he had taken from her purse. He had not yet discovered that the woman behind that name had spent 6 months studying every weakness in his unit. "This can still be simple," Holloway said, sliding a statement across the table. "You sign this, admit the evidence belonged to you, and the prosecutor may consider cooperation." Maya read the first page without touching the pen. The report claimed she had appeared nervous, attempted to leave, and voluntarily revealed the contents of her coat pocket. None of those things had happened. The arrest time was listed as 9:40. The store clock had shown 9:12 when Holloway entered. Officer Travis Reed had signed beneath a statement saying he personally witnessed the search from beginning to end. Maya looked toward the dark camera dome above the door. A red indicator light glowed for several seconds, then disappeared after Holloway pressed a control near the wall. "Why did you turn off the camera?" she asked. "The interview has not started. You placed a confession in front of me." Holloway leaned back. "You are in no position to debate procedure." Maya memorized the exact time shown on the digital clock behind him. 10:28. She noted the pen he had placed beside the false statement, the folder marked with the wrong evidence number, and the absence of any property receipt for her telephone. Every detail mattered. Every shortcut left a mark. Holloway lowered his voice. "People like you come through here every week believing they can challenge the officers who keep this city safe. The court hears your story, then it hears mine. Which one do you think survives?" Maya met his gaze. "The one supported by evidence." His smile faded. The door opened, and Reed stepped inside carrying a replacement evidence form. He avoided looking at Maya as Holloway instructed him to sign another page. "I did not observe the entire search," Reed said quietly. "You observed enough," Holloway answered. "Sign it." Reed hesitated. Then he wrote his name. Maya watched the pressure of the pen change halfway through the signature. Fear had entered the room with him. Holloway gathered the documents and told Maya she would be taken before a judge in the morning. Before leaving, he reminded her that refusing to cooperate would make her situation worse. The door closed. The camera remained dark. 20 minutes later, a booking officer allowed Maya one legal call. She dialed a number memorized before Operation Glass Harbor began. To anyone monitoring the line, it belonged to an after-hours legal referral service. Daniel Mercer answered using the approved cover greeting. Briarwood Legal Assistance. How may I direct your call? Maya kept her voice controlled. My name is Claire Bennett. I need representation concerning a shipment that arrived with the wrong federal seal. Silence held for half a second. That sentence was the emergency signal. It meant her cover remained intact, stolen federal evidence had surfaced, and the team must not intervene until the lie reached court. Mercer replied, An attorney will meet you at the courthouse. Maya added, Please tell her the delivery time was 9:12, not 9:40. That gave the team the location of the first contradiction. Understood, Mercer said. Do you feel safe until morning? Maya looked toward the dark camera, the unsigned property receipt, and Reed's trembling signature. Safe enough to let them finish writing everything down. When the call ended, she returned the receiver and sat alone beneath the humming light. Holloway believed silence had isolated her. He did not understand that silence had become the safest place to store the truth. By 9:40 the next morning, the Briarwood County Courthouse had already filled with the low murmur of attorneys, reporters, and families waiting beneath cold fluorescent lights. Maya sat beside Lena Foster at the defense table, still identified in every public document as Claire Bennett. Across the aisle, Sergeant Grant Holloway arranged his reports with the confidence of a man preparing to perform a story he had rehearsed. Officer Travis Reed sat behind him, pale and silent, his hands locked together beneath the table. Judge Rebecca Sloan entered, and the room rose before settling into a quiet broken only by turning pages and the steady ticking of the clock above the American flag. The prosecutor began with the evidence bag, describing it as a dangerous substance recovered during a lawful search. Holloway then took the witness stand and spoke in a calm, practiced voice. He claimed Maya had watched the officers nervously, tried to move toward the east exit, and resisted repeated requests to cooperate. He said she had placed one hand inside her coat, forcing him to conduct an immediate search for public safety. Maya listened without interruption. Every false statement entered the official record. Every detail gave the federal team another fact to test. Imagine sitting only a few feet from the man who framed you while he explains your behavior to a judge who has no reason to doubt his uniform. Maya felt Lena shift beside her. Did you try to leave? The attorney whispered. No. Did you reach into your coat? No. Then why is none of that in the store clerk's statement? Maya looked toward Holloway. Because they did not include it. Lena requested the complete incident file. The prosecutor handed over a thin folder containing the arrest report, a property sheet, and a notice stating that both body cameras had failed before the search. Lena read the timestamp twice. Your Honor, the report lists the arrest at 9:40, but the booking form says the evidence entered police custody at 9:31. Judge Sloan looked over her glasses. Sergeant Holloway, can you explain that sequence? Holloway answered without hesitation. A clerical entry made during a busy night. Lena turned another page. The body camera failure was reported at 10:06, nearly an hour after the search. How was the failure confirmed if the footage had not yet been reviewed? Holloway's expression remained composed, but Reed looked toward him. Judge Sloan asked the prosecutor whether store surveillance had been obtained. The prosecutor admitted that no video had been included in the file. The owner was uncooperative, Holloway said. Maya remembered the cashier offering to speak. Another lie entered the record. Lena studied the evidence receipt, then leaned toward Maya. This seal number is unusual. Maya took a pen and wrote 3 digits on the corner of Lena's legal pad. Lena compared them with the label beneath the red seal. They matched. What does this mean? She whispered. Ask where the bag was stored before last night. Lena stood and questioned Holloway about the evidence chain. He said the bag had been sealed immediately after recovery and delivered directly to police storage. Did Officer Reed witness the recovery? She asked. From beginning to end, Holloway replied. Reed's head lifted. The answer trapped him inside a report Maya knew he had not written. Judge Sloan closed the folder and looked toward the defense table. Unless counsel can present evidence challenging probable cause, I am prepared to order Ms. Bennett held pending further proceedings. Lena placed both hands on the table. Maya glanced at the clock. 10:16. 44 minutes had passed since the federal signal window began. Behind the courtroom doors, footsteps approached, but they had not yet reached the room. Maya leaned close to Lena and spoke in a voice no one else could hear. Before the judge rules, call Officer Reed. Ask him one question about Sergeant Holloway's left hand. Lena Foster rose before Judge Rebecca Sloan could announce her ruling. Your Honor, the defense requests permission to question Officer Travis Reed regarding the recovery of the evidence. Holloway turned sharply toward the second row. Reed looked as though the room had suddenly lost its air. The prosecutor objected, arguing that Reed's signed report already confirmed the search, but Judge Sloan studied the conflicting timestamps and allowed limited questioning. Reed walked to the witness stand with careful steps, swore to tell the truth, and sat beneath the cold courtroom lights. Lena approached without raising her voice. Officer Reed, where were you standing when Sergeant Holloway searched my client? Near the beverage coolers, he answered. Could you see Sergeant Holloway clearly? Reed glanced toward Holloway. Most of the time. Lena lifted the arrest report. This document says you observed the entire search. That is correct. Maya remained still, watching the tension gather in Reed's jaw. Lena placed the report down. Which hand was Sergeant Holloway using when he removed the evidence from Ms. Bennett's right coat pocket? Reed answered before caution could stop him. His left hand. The words landed softly. Their effect was immediate. Lena did not move. Judge Sloan looked up from the report. Even the ticking clock seemed louder. Officer Reed, Lena said. How did you know the evidence came from the right pocket? Reed's eyes widened. The report stated only that a substance had been recovered from Maya's coat. Holloway had never identified the pocket during his testimony. Lena continued. And how did you know which hand Sergeant Holloway used? Reed looked toward the prosecution table, but Holloway's expression offered no rescue. Imagine realizing that one automatic answer has opened every door you helped another person close. Reed took a slow breath. I saw the search. From beginning to end? No, Holloway shifted in his chair. Officer Reed is confused. Judge Sloan raised one hand. Sergeant, you will remain silent. Lena stepped closer to the witness stand. What did you see? Reed looked at Maya for the first time since the convenience store. Shame had replaced fear in his face. I saw Sergeant Holloway place the bag into her pocket before he announced the search. A sound moved through the courtroom. Not quite a gasp. More like an entire room remembering how to breathe. Holloway stood. That is false. He is protecting himself. Judge Sloan struck the gavel once. Sit down. Reed continued before courage could leave him. The report is false. The time is wrong. The body cameras did not fail. Sergeant Holloway ordered them turned off after the arrest. Lena asked whether he had written the statement bearing his signature. Reed shook his head. He wrote it. I signed it. Judge Sloan's face hardened. She ordered the courtroom deputy to secure the evidence bag, every police report, and all available digital records connected to the arrest. The prosecutor requested a recess. Holloway demanded to speak with counsel. Maya said nothing. She had spent the entire night waiting for the truth to emerge from someone who had helped bury it. Now the official record no longer belonged to Holloway alone. Judge Sloan turned toward Maya. Ms. Bennett, is there information this court has not been given? Before Maya could answer, the courtroom doors opened. Daniel Mercer entered beside Special Agent in Charge Vanessa Cole and two federal investigators carrying sealed folders. Mercer approached the clerk, presented a federal court order, and looked directly at Maya. Your Honor, he said, the defendant before you is not Claire Bennett, and this proceeding has just become part of an active federal investigation. Daniel Mercer placed the sealed federal order before Judge Rebecca Sloan, while Special Agent in Charge Vanessa Cole remained beside the courtroom doors, her expression composed and unmistakably serious. The two federal investigators moved quietly to opposite sides of the room, not to create a spectacle, but to ensure that no document, telephone, or evidence file left without authorization. Judge Sloan read the first page, then the second. Her eyes shifted from Mercer to Maya. You are asking this court to recognize a sealed federal operation, she said. Yes, Your Honor, Mercer replied. Operation Glass Harbor has been active for 6 months. Its purpose is to investigate stolen controlled evidence, falsified police reports, and coordinated misconduct within the Briarwood Narcotics Unit. Holloway rose again. This is an attempt to interfere with a lawful local case. Vanessa Cole turned toward him. Sergeant Holloway, you are the principal subject of that federal investigation. The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. Reporters stopped writing. The prosecutor lowered the folder in his hands. Officer Travis Reed stared at the floor as though every decision he had made since the convenience store had finally reached him. Judge Sloan looked toward Maya. Then who was the woman seated at the defense table? Mercer carried a second sealed envelope to the clerk, who delivered it to the judge. Inside were a federal credential verification, a protective identity order, and a photograph of Maya taken years earlier at her agency appointment ceremony. Judge Sloan read the name aloud. Special Agent Maya Carter, Drug Enforcement Administration. Lena Foster turned slowly toward her client. Surprise crossed her face, followed by understanding. The controlled silence. The knowledge of evidence seals. The refusal to reveal why she had been at the store. Every unexplained detail now belonged to the same truth. At the judge's instruction, the courtroom deputy removed the restraints from Maya's wrists. Mercer then handed Maya a smaller envelope. She opened it and placed her federal credentials on the defense table, directly beside the false arrest report. Holloway looked at the badge, then at the evidence bag he had believed would secure her detention. For the first time, he seemed to understand that the object had never been under his control. Vanessa Cole addressed the court. The bag displayed here was removed from a restricted federal evidence facility. Its seal contained a traceable identifier created after repeated losses from local custody. When Sergeant Holloway entered it into this case, the system confirmed both the missing evidence and the officer attempting to use it. Judge Sloan's expression hardened. Was this courtroom appearance expected by the federal team? Mercer answered carefully. We monitored the situation after Agent Carter transmitted an emergency signal. We allowed the local proceeding to continue only long enough to preserve sworn statements, signed reports, and the documented chain of custody. We intervened before any detention order could take effect. Holloway looked toward Maya. You let us arrest you. Maya stood, adjusted the sleeves of her navy coat, and met his eyes without anger. No, she said. I let you document exactly what you were willing to do when you believed no one important was watching. Judge Sloan ordered every item connected to the case placed under independent control. Federal investigators collected the evidence bag, the arrest reports, and the officer's department telephones. Reed was escorted to a separate interview room to provide a complete statement with counsel present. Holloway remained beside the prosecution table, surrounded not by enemies, but by the records he had created himself. Maya turned toward the judge. Her voice was calm, professional, and free of triumph. Thank you, Your Honor. I am ready to give my real statement now. Judge Rebecca Sloan cleared the courtroom of reporters and spectators before allowing Maya Carter to begin. Only the attorneys, federal investigators, essential court staff, and the officers connected to the case remained. Maya stood beside the defense table, no longer treated as a defendant, yet she spoke without satisfaction. For 6 months, Operation Glass Harbor documented missing controlled evidence, altered arrest records, and unexplained failures in body camera systems, she said. The same officers appeared whenever evidence disappeared, and the same neighborhoods carried the consequences. Daniel Mercer placed a series of sealed files before the judge. Each contained an arrest report, a storage log, and a photograph of evidence that no longer matched what had entered police custody. The differences were small enough to escape casual review. A weight reduced by several ounces. A cash total rewritten after midnight. A signature copied onto a page the listed officer had never seen. Small changes. Repeated changes. Together, they formed a system. Special Agent in Charge Vanessa Cole explained that the federal evidence bag used against Maya had been selected as a tracking item after investigators discovered unauthorized access to restricted storage. Its identifying seal was invisible to anyone who did not know where to look. Holloway had stolen what he believed was ordinary evidence. Then he had placed it into Maya's coat, signed a false report, and presented the bag in open court. Every step had strengthened the case against him. Judge Sloan examined the records in silence. How many local prosecutions may have been affected? She asked. Mercer answered carefully. At least 23 require immediate review. That number may increase. In a separate interview room, Travis Reed gave federal investigators permission to record his statement. He admitted that Holloway had directed officers to disable cameras, revise timelines, and sign reports prepared in advance. Reed had not taken money, but he had remained silent when he knew evidence was false. He provided access codes, storage schedules, and the names of 2 officers who regularly moved sealed property after normal hours. He also revealed that Samuel Pierce, the former evidence clerk, had been threatened after saving copies of the access logs. Samuel had not abandoned Maya at the convenience store. He had seen Holloway's vehicle outside his home and gone into hiding until the federal team could secure his safety. By early afternoon, investigators located him at his sister's house in another county. The records he carried completed the chain. Holloway's department telephone contained messages arranging evidence transfers and discussing which defendants were least likely to challenge the police. Several messages referred to poor black neighborhoods as easy places to build cases because residents rarely had private counsel. The discrimination was no longer an implication. It was written in his own words. Judge Sloan ordered every related file preserved and requested independent review of all convictions connected to Holloway's unit. The local prosecutor withdrew the accusation against Maya and announced that no part of the false arrest would remain on her record. Holloway was placed on immediate administrative suspension while federal and state authorities prepared charges involving evidence theft, obstruction, false statements, and violations of civil rights. As investigators escorted him from the courtroom, he stopped near Maya. His confidence had vanished, but resentment remained. "You made everyone in that unit look corrupt," he said. Maya held his gaze. "No, I recorded what the unit chose to become." He looked toward the evidence table, where his reports, messages, and stolen seal rested inside clear protective covers. For years, he had built cases by deciding whose voice would matter and whose would disappear beneath official language. Now he was surrounded by the permanent record of his own choices. The courtroom had once been his stage. By sunset, it had become the place where every lie finally acquired an exhibit number. 6 months later, the same courtroom looked almost unchanged, but the records inside it told a different story. The cold lights still reflected from the polished wood. The clock still moved with quiet indifference. Yet 23 cases connected to Grant Holloway's unit had been reviewed, 14 convictions had been overturned, and 6 people had walked free after investigators proved that evidence had been altered or invented. Others received new hearings, corrected records, and formal apologies that could never return the years they had lost, but could finally acknowledge the truth. Holloway was convicted of stealing controlled evidence, falsifying reports, obstructing an investigation, and violating civil rights. 2 officers who had helped move evidence also accepted responsibility. Travis Reed pleaded guilty to making false statements and agreed to testify against the network. His cooperation reduced his sentence, but it did not erase his silence. When asked why he had finally spoken, he gave the only honest answer he had left. "I was afraid of losing my career, so I helped other people lose their freedom." Judge Rebecca Sloan created a mandatory review process for any case involving missing camera footage, altered timestamps, disputed evidence seals, or reports signed by officers who had not witnessed the search. She also required prosecutors to examine patterns across cases instead of treating each complaint as an isolated accusation. During a public hearing, she admitted that the court had trusted uniforms faster than it had trusted people. "Procedure without scrutiny," she said, "can turn confidence into a substitute for truth." Lena Foster left the appointed defense office and joined a legal team helping families clear wrongful charges from employment checks, housing applications, and school records. Samuel Pierce returned to Briarwood after federal protection ended. He testified about the storage logs he had saved and later became an advisor on evidence security, teaching departments how easily a system could fail when honest employees were frightened into silence. Maya Carter returned to her work with the Drug Enforcement Administration, but before accepting her next assignment, she visited the community center on the east side of Briarwood. The families who had spoken to her during Operation Glass Harbor filled the room. Some had regained their freedom. Others were still waiting for hearings. Maya did not promise that every loss could be repaired. She promised that no file would be ignored simply because the person named inside it lacked money, influence, or a respected title. An elderly mother approached her holding the cleared record of her son, who had spent years being rejected from jobs because of a charge built by Holloway's unit. "You gave him his name back," she said. Maya looked at the document, and shook her head gently. His name was always his. The system finally stopped lying about it. Later that afternoon, Maya returned to the courthouse alone. The room was empty except for a clerk organizing sealed exhibits from Operation Glass Harbor. On one table rested the evidence bag Holloway had planted in her coat, now marked for permanent storage. Beside it lay his false report, Reed's corrected statement, and the federal tracking record that had exposed the stolen seal. Maya stood there for a moment, remembering the restraints around her wrists, Holloway's confident testimony, and the silence before Reed admitted what he had seen. They had brought her into that room, believing the official record belonged to whoever wore the uniform. They had used the courtroom to give their lie a voice. Maya used the same courtroom to make the truth permanent. She entered as the woman they expected no one to believe. She left as the agent who had been building their case all along.